Welcome to the Growfire Show, where we talk about how to grow and acquire. I'm your host, Jenny Gellatly-Valiulis, and I'm an entrepreneur, real estate investor, and a licensed real estate agent. I've spent the last 15 years in franchising, helping people build and scale businesses. Here on the show, I'll be joined by entrepreneurs and operators of all kinds. If you're ready to think bigger, build smarter, and create more opportunities, you're in the right place. Let's get into it. Erez is a seasoned entrepreneur, investor, and business strategist with over 2 decades of leadership experience. He is the president and CEO of MIT Consulting and 𝐬𝐮𝐻 Corporation based in the Toronto area. Over the past 23 years, he has built and scaled his companies into industry leaders, earning recognition as one of Canada's top managed IT service providers. With expertise spanning private equity, venture capital, mergers and acquisitions, management consulting, and business development, Erez has advised organizations across multiple sectors, helping them scale, optimize operations, and navigate complex growth challenges. Let's jump into the conversation. Erez, welcome to the show. I'm so glad that you could make it today. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it was so cool when you reached out on LinkedIn. It's amazing how connections happen, but you're joining the Growfire Show today, and I'll be joining your podcast later. So it's a really fun way to collaborate. I appreciate it.
Yeah, likewise. It's always interesting podcaster to podcaster kind of getting on each other's show and understanding each other's history and journeys and business. So it's always exciting to share ideas and seeing where things are going.
Absolutely. Well, today's discussion, I really would like to break it into 3 segments for interviewing you. And this is fun because I don't know how often you get interviewed. So the tables are turning now, which is kind of fun. I was reviewing your profile. I was extremely impressed. Like, you are very diversified in your ventures. You are extremely dedicated to volunteer work in many different capacities. But more importantly, what caught my attention was the longevity and success of your businesses that you own as president and CEO. So let's talk a little bit about all of your ventures, really from infancy and how you started those ventures to developing them to where they are today. So MIT, you've had this for over 23 years now. And that's pretty remarkable. There's not a lot of companies that can say, yeah, I've owned my company. We've been successful for over 2 decades. So talk a little bit about your journey. I would love to hear, first segment, how did you make your first million? Whether it was personal through your own savings or your own personal investments, or professional through ventures. And then the second segment, we will talk about how you scaled to be a market leader in IT and in consulting. And then third, we'll end with profit and longevity, because controlling your operating costs, being able to weather the storm through crisis, financial crisis, or global pandemics, that longevity piece, we'll talk a little bit about the factors that made you so successful long term. So let's jump into the conversation.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah. So first, how did you make your first million? Tell us the story.
Well, that's an interesting one. And looking back, wasn't an easy journey because there's no playbook out there, right? At the end of the day, everybody's always like, oh my God, I've got to make $1 million. But it's definitely something that eludes a lot of people. And for many, many years, I actually couldn't figure it out. I worked 100-hour work weeks. I remember starting my business, and the first year, I think I made $30,000 in the first year, working a full-time job and starting this company. It was definitely not an easy journey. And I was very fortunate enough to be able to find a few individuals that mentored me. I had a gentleman by the name of David Fluss. He mentored me a bit. He was an accountant, gave me some good advice. And then I also ended up landing with a few other, clients early on that saw potential in me and was able they were able to sort of give me a little bit of nuggets over the years to kind of be more successful and be smarter with my time. And so, it took me about, I'm going to say, several years to kind of get through the hurdles. And first couple of years were just getting my bearings and trying to figure it out and making a living off what I do today. But as I got closer to that 7 year mark, I realized that there was a potential and there was an opportunity to make actual real money and not just a lifestyle. And most businesses out there today, and I use this word very keenly, um, most businesses out there today are lifestyle businesses. So they earn a revenue that is respective to the owner's expectations to be able to say, I live a salary that I would normally obtain in a job. And that's definitely not something I wanted to do for, 10, 20, 30 years, because there's a lot of stresses and a lot of frustrations when it comes to collecting, paying salaries, downturns. How are you going to survive all these elements? And at the end of the day, the reason why 90 some odd percent of businesses fail is because of those stresses and those challenges, that there are no handouts for business entrepreneurs. um, when you look at how that comes along, it's really about collaboration. And so I was very fortunate enough to collaborate with my clients. I had some vendors and colleagues that I was able to collaborate with. And after about 7 to 8 years, my company, exceeded sales of 7 digit figures per year. And the company at that point in time was also now generating profits that I was able to not only take a salary home, but I was also able to now put stuff aside. And so part of the process, and I'll use a famous book, The Automatic Millionaire. Um, I took a page out of that book and I realized, wait a minute, we need to start setting up a fund aside on those rainy days. And so we started saving an additional 10 plus percentage, sometimes up to 20% per year of profits, towards our slush fund. And as part of that process, we also got involved with our banks and we started investing that money, which obviously is something that you can do. And originally, I didn't realize that. I just thought, the money had to sit there. And again, if you've got money sitting in your business, there is something called a burn rate, which everybody knows, which means that, you got to pay your taxes, you got to pay your staff, you got to be able to access liquid funds. But at the same time, excess funds shouldn't be sitting in a bank account. Doesn't matter if it's your personal or your business. So when you're looking at actually, becoming a millionaire, either your business making a million or you personally having a million in the bank account, it's not going to happen just because you won a lottery or you won some big transaction worth $10 million and here's a $1 million check. Yes, there are unicorns out there, but we didn't have that luxury in my business. So, saving 10 to 20% of every quarter's profits and taking that away and investing it into something like a GIC or index fund or something along those lines, it was giving us a return of 5 to 10% on annual basis. And we started investing those funds early on in the business. So by year 10 of the business, there were multiple revenue sources for the company, both between investments that were already making and generating revenue. And on top of that, the company itself was highly profitable to the point that now it had a multiple revenue stream. And that's before I even got into additional businesses and other verticals that the company eventually expanded into. So it took me what I would call a steady Eddie before I became that millionaire. Um, and it was something that, was all granular, piece by piece, brick by brick. And it's approximately how long it took me to get.
I love your answers so much because you talked about how you really didn't start seeing that you could be extremely profitable and generate a lot of revenue until year 7. where I think a lot of small businesses, most of them stop before the fifth year. So that's very unusual, right? You hung in there for 7, 8 years, and that is when you met that trajectory, which is pretty remarkable that you did that. And it's really interesting to hear your story. I loved how you were talking about multiple income streams. And I think a lot of small business owners do not realize that they can create bank accounts where they're going to be generating certain revenue from interest or from investments. So thank you for sharing that detail. It's really appreciated.
Yeah, you're welcome. And I think it's critical that we all have to realize the potential of investments. Very important.
Absolutely. Yeah. So you started off, thank you for sharing the beginning, but let's move to the next segment, which is really about talking about how to become a market leader in the IT space. What differentiates MIT from your competitors? What is it? What's that magic secret sauce that has worked so well for you to scale your business like you have?
Yeah, it's an interesting story. So, early on, one of the things that I realized is that everybody can buy Google and Microsoft directly from Google and Microsoft, or you can go and buy your computer from Dell and or Lenovo or HP. You don't need me as your so-called partner of business. It's really an option that you choose. And so we had to realize that you had to differentiate yourself. And I'm not going to compete with a retailer like a Best Buy or, an Amazon store, which have billions of dollars behind them. And so one of the early things that we discovered was people valued relationships and people valued our advice. And that was critical. The advice piece was actually something that was not common, and it's still not very common. I think a lot of competitors and a lot of typical sales strategies about getting the product into the customer's hands, and that works. Let's call it 8 out of 10 times, 7 out of 10 times. But there's those times where understanding the customer's business is the differentiator. And so we had a very specific approach around understanding the company, the client himself. So one law firm over another law firm, different partners, different business strategies, different way they want to operate, and we had to accommodate that just so that we were meeting their expectations. And that's really what set us apart. And so early on, when we got into becoming that hockey stick, kind of growth strategy and projection, it was about adopting a different sales methodology and around meeting the customer's expectations and matching the solution for the customer based on their budget and their business expectations. Once we got to that, we were able to then see a growth, profitability, and service better clients versus just companies that were looking to buy and purchase transactional business, because we weren't really focused on just transactional. And that was where we really started differentiating ourselves. And that's why we are successful as we are today.
I think that's a terrific answer. The customization and the true care in the details of each client would definitely win them over, right?
Yeah.
You have a really interesting background that lends to that. So you're extremely experienced in venture capital, mergers, acquisitions, and really adding value. So that background, just to be able to understand every client's individual needs and challenges, and to be able to solve for those unique challenges, I think that's really what has contributed largely to your success over time.
It did actually. And that was sort of a different approach. So once the company was, let's call it, had its legs and it was able to, present itself on its own, I was able to start expanding our focus on just organic growth or even through sales and marketing. So over time, early on, we saw opportunities to acquire other competitors that were either struggling or looking to exit. And as part of that strategy, we also got into complementary verticals. So we were very focused on one source of income. And over the years, we realized, hey, you know what? All of our customers have phones, and that's very technical. Like today, a phone system is IP based, so it's all through the network. And we're supporting that, but we're not selling it. So why don't we buy a competitor that actually provided that service? And that's what we did several years ago. We bought out a VoIP provider, and we now have our own VoIP business that we've actually been building on. So this is sort of an example of how we we were able to both acquire and add on different industries that were complementary to our business and added more value again to our customer base. So it was a win-win and win to actually achieve those goals.
That's crazy intelligent. I love that strategy. We see it a lot. And, restaurant companies buying manufacturing facilities, like there's many examples of this idea. And people, I don't think it dawns on a lot of people. You're right. It's a terrific revenue stream. In terms of structure, I'm going to ask this, get into the weeds a little bit here. Do you have your parent company like MIT owning that, or are you separate incorporation altogether? How did you structure the ownership of that?
So the phone system itself, actually, the VoIP company, Yestel, because of regulations with the CRTC and stuff like that, that actually ended up being a separate entity on its own. Um, in some of the verticals that we've added, we've started off with within MIT proper, um, but as they grow and they eventually have additional, I call it significant revenue, and usually that's somewhere between about a half a million and $1 million a year in revenue. We will spin that off into a separate corporation so that we potentially either have investors, or we may have partners. And if even if we don't, you never know if you want to sell that entity off or acquire additional assets. So at this point in time, MIT is a very complex structure of several different companies, including our US expansion. So in the last 2 years, we've expanded into the US, and that requires different rules and regulations. So when we look at, um, the complexity of just running a single location, single source business, you try to keep it simple, maybe two corporations, a holdco and an opco. And that would mean that you have like a holding company for the family, let's just say. And that would be a basic strategic. I wouldn't be looking at trusts and any other sort of complex investment strategy or tax deferral strategy. It's too complex and it's expensive. Whereas just setting up a corporation as a holdco and then an opco being the operational company that is the front of the business. This allows you to distribute funds and roll up funds into, let's call it, an investment, and you can always lend money back and forth. So right now it's very complex. But yeah, in the beginning it was just one company, and eventually we added on corporations upon corporations, and today there are several of them.
These are the details I absolutely love getting into. This is the juice right here, because entrepreneurs, they only learn from each other. They only learn from other entrepreneurs, and it's only what someone is willing to tell you. What you just shared, many newer entrepreneurs will not know that they can do, right? So that structure is extremely common, especially in the hospitality business. If someone owns multiple hotels or they own multiple restaurant locations, to have separate holdcos for every location, and so on and so forth. So this leads into my next question in this segment, which is really talking about how your revenue has grown over time. Like if you're to look at rolling in all of those corporations that hold different pieces and assets and arms of the company, from where you started with making 30,000 in your first year to hitting over seven figures in revenue by year 7, 8, how has your revenue grown now, like 23 years in? Tell us your story.
Yeah, we've actually been very fortunate enough that we've only had 1 year, and that was during the pandemic, that we actually went the other direction in over 15 years. So our revenues consistently grown either between 3 to 15% year over year growth for the last 15 years, except during the pandemic, where either flatlined or did have a bit of a dip, um, because companies weren't spending after they all hunkered down. Um, it was, no extra spending, right? I got my laptop, I'm working from home. We'll see what it looks like. And that was the end of it. So yeah, we keep on looking at what customers are looking for today. And so, you know, it's critical to surround yourself with the right mix of people. And I'm not even talking about this internally, I'm talking about this holistically. So, one of the things that came to mind with your previous question and where this question goes, the people I had around me when I was a $1 million business, I thought they were the smartest people in the room. But then I realized if I wanted to be a $3 to $5 million business, they were not the smartest people in the room. And so I ended up having to fire my lawyer, my accountant, all my advisors, even my mentors and my social groups that I was involved with. If it was like, I was a big BNI user when I started my business, and a lot of people out there, I'm sure you've heard of one of these breakfast clubs that you bring a lead and they give you a lead, and that's how I started. Literally, when I was doing like 100 grand a year in business, and not 100 grand revenue for me, 100 grand in business. So like, still basically, hand to mouth. But the opportunity of working with lawyers and accountants and consultants and even entrepreneurs, and there are business clubs out there that are geared for businesses that are larger. It gave me a circle of understanding of people that were able to say, hey, when you're at this point in your business, you're going to need to start thinking differently. And it's no longer about knowing every relationship and holding on to everything that you need to do every day. You need to trust systems, processes, and your clients will tell you what they need. And so I realized that we had to trust that methodology. And once I did, it was a game changer. Case in point, yesterday we hosted an event for about 20 of our clients. They gave us feedback. They talked about what they're looking for in the next little while around AI, around cybersecurity, about purchasing, about the market, about global political situations. What's their concerns? You got to think about this. I'm their IT guy by nature, but I have to factor in all these variables on how we're going to deliver service to keep their businesses alive. And so I'm taking that approach to make them better. And that is basically how we've kept on growing year over year, because they see more value, and the more they invest in what we deliver, they're more successful, we're more profitable, and we're able to drive more revenue across the board for them and for us.
You dug into something there that a lot of business owners face, which is the journey of people you're surrounding yourself with in your personal and in your professional life as you're growing your business. But what was so interesting was, the consultants piece, it seems like a bit of a more obvious one, right? Because if your lawyer or your accountant did not have the skill and the expertise at your level, then they can't help you build your business. And, then you said mentors, and then you said social groups, right? So I think, you do have to have the courage to let go of certain ideas, certain relationships, if they don't serve you, and you feel like they're holding you back from growing your revenue, from growing internally and developing yourself as a person and as a leader. It's difficult to let go. So it's really interesting for you to share that detail, and I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah, we'll say that was the hardest thing I did um, as an entrepreneur, because the people that got me there, I felt loyalty, I felt trust, and I had to let them go because looking around, I realized that even my admin staff, even my bookkeeper that I had in my company, they were always complaining, oh my God, there's so many transactions. I'm so busy. And I realized I was coming to the end of their capabilities. And so when you have somebody in your business that is overwhelmed by the business that you have, then you've realized that you've hit the limit of that individual, be it a technician, a sales, a marketing, um, whatever it may be, an administrative person. And that really sets things apart when you start looking at it and you bring in a salesperson in your industry and they're just throwing crazy numbers out there. They're used to closing $10 million a year in business, and you're trying to help them to say, "Hey, come help sell my business," and I'm doing $200,000-300,000 a year. For them, it's like, well, I do that every month if I'm generating 10 million a year. So what you're doing in a year is what they do in a month. It's not going to be difficult for them to do it. The question is, can you attract them to come work for you? But if you do, the potential is massive because they understand what it means to run a $10 million book of business. So it's no longer overwhelming for them. It actually is becoming sort of the norm for them. And that is sort of a major aha moment that most entrepreneurs don't realize, that they have to invest in the talent that they're with, from the bookkeeper to the admin staff to all the way down within your corporation, all the way up to your trusted advisors. So it's an interesting multi-pronged conversation that is not very much in the forefront when you talk about a lot of the audiobooks or any of the materials that are being discussed today. It's definitely an overthought.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. It is an overthought. It's an afterthought. And I think that a lot of people are aware of it. It's one thing to hear it. Oh, you are the sum of the 5 people that you're closest to, or the average of the 5 people you're closest to. It's
Yeah.
one thing to hear a soundbite like that, and it's another thing to have the courage to say, I'm going to take a step back and evaluate this and take action on this. So I think it's just such an excellent point to raise, because I don't think you can move to the next level of growing your business without making those difficult changes. So really cool that you shared that. Thank you. I'm going to move to the closing segment here, which really is about, profitability. We've talked about your beginning of your journey, scaling to being a market leader, profitability, and operating costs. And it's really an interesting segue too that we just did. What has been some of the best practices for you to control operating costs, especially when headwinds come our way, like financial crisis, global pandemic? How have you weathered those storms, and how have you been able to have the longevity that you've had in your company?
So that's a really good question. And I've had three sort of pillars of challenges that impacted our company significantly. The most recent has been the pandemic. I think that impacted everybody's business. And we're starting to see the ramifications of it right now in the workforce. But prior to that, we were 100% Canadian. So we were 100% in house, 100% Canadian. We had over 30 employees working for us, either full time, part time. We even had up to 40 plus people at one point in time working for us, between full time and part time. And it became very hard to find resources. And at the same time, profitability and scalability and competitiveness between world economics really hit headwind when we hit the pandemic. Um, and so we, for the first time, had to consider alternatives. And so, give you an example. I am not a great bookkeeper. I am not good at administration. I am not good at those elements. I actually don't like it at all. And so I tried to hire people to do that for me, but I also don't know who to hire because I'm actually not very good at it. So As long as I got some sort of spreadsheets and numbers, I thought I was getting the right person. And that was the wrong attitude. So I was spending significant amount of money to hire controllers and senior bookkeepers to run my business. And my accountant was telling me that my paperwork was wrong a year after year. And I keep some people would leave. And eventually I hired an outsourced agency. And it was an aha moment for me. I was like, wait a minute. I have a company now with 15 or so bookkeepers and a controller and all this stuff. And they do my payroll and they do my taxes and everything's on time and it's all accurate. And my accountant's happy. And I pay them almost the same as I would hire one employee full time. And I'm sitting here, okay, what else can I do? And so we've evolved almost 50% of our company today in virtual outsourced agencies, no different than customers use our business. So we are a service that companies don't want to manage IT people. They'd rather pay us a monthly retainer and have their IT problems go away. Well, I know nothing about marketing. I know a little bit, but not enough to be dangerous. Like I could not execute on what my vision is. I need an agency or I need a team to do that. So I basically outsourced our marketing. Our sales reps that we had in here are no longer what I call hunters. We actually have a lead gen agency that works for us. We have a bookkeeping service or a full outsourced agency that does all of our financials. Um, and now we even augment our resources even from our day-to-day stuff. So when it comes to help desk, after hours support, software development, stuff like that, we use local and abroad service providers that can help us augment and deliver better response time, reliability, and at the same time still be profitable. Um, and again, depending on what the customer wants, we can do onshore, near shore, or global, depending on price point. And that's been a game changer for us. Less stress for me because if I add 5 or 10 new customers, I literally go to my agencies and say, "Hey, I got great news. We're going to need that many more people to work for us," and they're going to be like, "We have it. We don't have to start hiring and interviewing people. The agencies will deal with that, and it's their responsibility." So that has been the biggest aha moment that came to us over the last 5 years, and we are no longer looking at full-time hires in mass. It is something that now we look at agencies, and about 90% of our agencies today are all Canadian based, and we work with them, and we're very happy with that, and we're happy to do that. I think only one is US and one is international. So we've changed the game significantly in that regard, and it's helped us grow and be more profitable and more sustainable.
Yeah, I think that a lot of people underestimate the value of outsourcing, right? Instead of having your own in-house teams, carrying that overhead, carrying everything that goes along with that. So terrific answer. And I mean, outsourcing combined with AI as well, it's absolutely incredible what you can accomplish versus what it took so many more resources to do even 10 years ago. You can't even make the comparison now. It's remarkable.
Correct.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to end with the closing questions now. So I've got two questions. The first is, and this is in a few words. The first is, after 23 years of being extremely successful, what piece of advice would you give to a new entrepreneur to be successful? And the second question is, again, in a few words, up until this point in time, what have been the highlights of your life?
So I'll reverse the answer. So the greatest highlight of my life has been my family and children. Um, there is nothing, not a trophy, and I've got a pile of trophies sitting right behind me. I think I got about 30 awards in the last 10 years. Um, Nothing compares to my kids and my family in respect to the achievements and the legacy I'm leaving behind for them. That is definitely the top of it. Everything else, in the sense of giving back to community and all the other things, they're great, but there will be nothing better than my children. As for a piece of advice that I find today with social media and content and the notion that I'm hearing all over the world today is everybody's a billionaire or everybody's a millionaire just by getting up and starting whatever career or job or business they're going to start running. That there are unicorns out there. Yes, there are people out there that they're very fortunate to be at the right place at the right time. 99% of all people out there that start a business are not that fortunate. And you need to realize that, if you want to be successful, you need to be consistent and persistent, right? Showing up every day, doing what you say you're going to do, delivering what you planned on doing, and over time people will trust you, build on you, and give you the business that you're asking for it. Famous guy Scott Galloway, he has that "don't follow your passion." It's one of my favorite clips. If you haven't seen it, go Google it and find it on YouTube or whatever platform it's there. Scott says it the best. Most people made their money in oil smelting and whatever not. Their passion is either evolves from what they do every day as a lawyer, as an accountant, as a hairdresser, whatever it is that you do in life, real estate, that it becomes your passion because you're passionate about what you do. And that is the truth. I'm passionate about helping businesses. When I walk into an office and I tell them, "Hey, how can I do what I do every day to make your company more successful?" That's my passion. And so thinking that you're going to be this big Uber success, no. Overnight, like I said, one out of 1,000. But being consistent over time, you'll get there. And the most important thing is, and you said it about 10 minutes ago, and again, I think that was either Simon Sinek or another famous speaker out there about, you are the best of the five, or I think Scott also mentioned it recently in his most recent book, is, you are the average of your five friends, right? So look at who your friends are. If they're all successful people, you must be in the right room. If you are, going in the same direction, if you're paddling in a boat and all of you are not paddling, or you're the only one paddling, you're going to eventually fail. So you want to make sure that you're surrounded by successful people, keep things moving forward. Always be asking why, never settle for the average, always be striving, and always have a plan, even in the good times and the bad times, because if you're always going to think that things will just show up, they don't. um the minute the pandemic hit, I can tell you right now, within 1 hour we already had a strategy plan on how we were going to handle it, how we were going to accommodate it, and how we were going to address our customers. And we had a response plan within 1 day for our customers. These things don't just happen overnight. So, keep your eyes open, look forward, and keep chugging every day, and you'll make it there one day as long as you keep consistent.
Great answer. Thank you so much for sharing your words of wisdom. I think you're absolutely right. People have a misconception that they're just going to be an overnight millionaire, and oftentimes they give up too soon, right? Like it took you 7, 8 years to see, holy cow, I'm onto something. This has really good legs to it. And I think, we're just conditioned now through social media to see that 1 in 1,000 and go, oh, I could be an instant millionaire. And I also think we're conditioned to believe that there is such thing as a truly passive investment. And there isn't, right? There is no passive investment. There's no such thing. It's going to take work and consistency. So terrific answer. Erez, thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate you joining me today.
It was my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
If you enjoyed today's conversation with Erez as much as I did, please remember to like and subscribe so that you can catch the next episode of the GrowAcquire Show, where we dive into detail of how to grow and acquire. Thanks for joining us and have a great day. If this episode got you thinking differently about how to grow and acquire your income, then you're exactly who this is for. Make sure you're following along the Grow Choir show so you don't miss the next idea, opportunity, or conversation. And if you know someone who's ready to stop just earning and start owning, share this with them. Because the goal isn't just to make money, it's to grow it and acquire more of it. I'm Jenny, and I'll see you in the next episode.